Don't touch me.
Okay.
I'm a celebrity.
I didn't do anything wrong! This show's doing pretty good for somebody that nobody watches. You, not Caleb, not Kevin, not Dylan. Nobody fucking called me when I got fired.
George did not get fired. He quit.
You guys should fight right now.
I swear to God, Bobby Lee, stop my co-host.
Who's your partner?
He's the newest.
You might want to give him his 2-week notice.
Did you know your daddy's an idiot?
Funnily enough, this is a topic I actually found from Umpaville.
That guy eats tampons.
Now, I need to begin this video by saying that there is no shade being thrown. There is no juicy, spicy drama that I'm having with other YouTubers here. This is merely picking up the trails of what another YouTuber discovered and me looking a little bit deeper.
A little bit deeper, digging, swimming.
So, a couple of days ago, world-renowned, world-famous YouTuber Umpaville uploaded a video talking about the situation with Logan Paul and George Janko. Umpaville, if you don't know, is another commentary channel, incredibly wealthy. I think he's got around $15 billion in his bank account. He also has this funny little mustache as well. Now, when Umpaville made this video, he unlisted it pretty quickly. After unlisting that video, he followed up immediately with a video basically explaining why he removed the original video, basically saying he glossed over some topics and he should have looked into it more.
Yesterday, I posted a video and then 3 hours later, I took down that video. The real truth of it is I glossed over incredibly important stuff and fell for very shallow, basic receipts that were provided in an awesome TikTok video that Logan Paul made.
I mean, the way he dealt with that was great. You know, he unlisted the video because he thought it was wrong. It's still there for people to, you know, publicly watch if they really want to look into it. We've all made mistakes on this platform. Like, for example, me with the Fallout TV show and the Kendrick and Drake beef, where I mispronounced some of the albums. Metro's boot. And no one is ever going to let that go. But what Umpa was researching, I found it really, really interesting, and I dived into a huge rabbit hole looking into it. This concerns some big players, like I said, George Janko, Logan Paul, Mike Milak, and Bobby Lee. Now, the weird thing is, Bobby Lee, I actually have talked about this guy before on my channel, but that was years and years ago. Do you remember that review I did of KSI's comedy film with the biggest quotation marks imaginable? Bobby Lee was actually in that film, and now it's going to come full circle that I'm talking about him on the Shluk channel. Now, if you know, Logan Paul has a podcast called Impaulsive.
Logan Paul, Floyd Mayweather.
Floyd's gonna beat his fucking ass.
It's kind of like the podcast I do, to be honest.
And so they've started to smell their own farts.
I'm not touching the low-hanging fruit there.
Oh, fucking piece of shit. Fuck you.
I could hear him silently smirk as soon as you said that.
That didn't even cross my mind. Holy shit.
But it's not a bunch of old people speaking over each other. It's a bunch of billionaires speaking over each other. Now, Logan hosts Impaulsive with Mike Milak. Now, I would consider that Mike and Logan have a better relationship than Logan with his brother Jake. I mean, to be fair, honestly, at this point, Logan Paul probably defends Prime more than he does his brother Jake. Now, Mike is someone who is known for writing a book that he really wanted you to buy. You better buy that book.
I just want to sell out this book. The Fifth Vital, available right now on it.
And also dating Lana Rhodes, who does a bit of the adult film stuff. But Impaulsive, a while ago, used to have a third host, a permanent host, and that was George Janko. Now, George has got a lot of hate. He's always been seen as this like Logan Paul clinger on because, you know, he's mostly known nowadays for being a host of the Impaulsive podcast until he left. But originally, back in the day, he was actually pretty big on Vine. He had around 500,000 followers, which if you do the inflation reference to like, you know, Vine followers to TikTok followers, that's about 7 billion followers. And of course, because he came from Vine, which all these people did, he did a lot of collabs back on Vine with Logan. Were they funny? Were they hilarious? What do you think, bro, is Vine?
Yo, you like this shirt on me?
Yeah, it looks good.
No, I'm not feeling it.
Oh my God, I found it myself.
And when the Vine exodus originally happened and everyone left, he went onto YouTube with Logan and he got a pretty big following. And then in around 2020, he started appearing pretty regularly on Logan Paul's podcast show, Impaulsive. And one thing you probably notice is why does every single YouTuber on the entire planet end up becoming a podcaster? Because they've realized, and trust me, I've known this from personal experience, you put in about 1/10 of the effort you do in a YouTube video and you get paid around 100 times more. I mean, think about it. These videos are put out on the main channel. The next one's going to be like 16 hours long. I'll probably get a sponsor for it that like barely breaks even. Or I could just sit there on a podcast playing Fortnite, not really paying attention, and probably make 10 times the amount of money that the Darkwood video would ever make. And this is where we introduce the biggest player in the story, Bobby Lee. Now, Bobby Lee is a stand-up comedian and an actor. Like I said, he's been in great works like KSI and Casper Lee, Laid in America, an amazing film, truly one of the greats. Now, Bobby Lee is someone who I never really invested time into, I never looked into, but I've seen him everywhere. You know when you're like doom scrolling TikTok at 3 in the morning and you see people that basically just stole a clip from someone else and they put like GTA gameplay at the bottom of like someone going down a hill? A lot of those clips might actually be a podcast. And on that podcast, you might have Bobby Lee, you know, just talking about some bizarre life story. I think one of his most viral stories, you probably have seen it, is him talking about this weird situation where someone touched him that had Down syndrome.
When I was 9, I got molested by a guy with Down syndrome.
Don't laugh, Brandon.
That really does bring a whole new level to the TikTok comment section saying, I'm going to touch you. Now, he's known for a lot of things, you know, his work with Mad TV, Pineapple Express, The Dictator as well with Sacha Baron Cohen. And he's even going to appear in the upcoming Borderlands film, which kind of makes sense because he does actually have this channel called Bobby Lee. And he was a gamer. He uploaded like 2 gaming videos 10 years ago. So I'm going to call him a gamer.
People don't realize this, but this is the exact amount of people that go to a Creed concert. 450.
One thing I do want to say as well that's completely wild, looking at these videos of Bobby Lee like 10 years ago and looking at him now, he looks the exact same. Believe me, I'm a 27-year-old man. That wall is coming for me any day now. I'm going to wake up one morning, get out of my bed, look in the mirror. I'm just going to look like Gollum. He's known most nowadays for his podcast, Tiger Belly, and his other very popular podcast, which he hosts with Andrew Santino. That one being called Bad Friends. Now, whenever I've seen clips of Bobby, I've always thought, oh, it's the guy that told the Down syndrome story, Lamau. But every time I go into the comment sections, I always see that people are calling him out, saying that he's a creep. He tells really bizarre stories and also sexually harassing multiple people. Now, I'm going to put that in the filing cabinet for a minute because we will definitely get back to that. That is the main focus of the video. But to give context, I want to talk about the situation with Loverboy Logan and Loverboy George. Now, George isn't on the podcast anymore. Big shock. Mostly because George felt, and to be fair, you could kind of tell in clips, he was becoming the punching bag more and more in the episodes. He was being talked over. No one really cared about him.
But he was screwing it all up.
Yeah. I was actually in pain. Thanks for remembering that episode. But you just shitted on me. Now the whole comments.
Well, now I'm trying to bring it back.
Fuck up everything.
And things between Logan and George started to get really, really awkward. Now, one thing I've noticed watching a lot of podcasts, it seems that a 2-host format seems to work the best. If you add 3, it gets a little bit confusing. If you add 4, it becomes very confusing. Any more than that, it is basically just inoperable. It's like an Xbox 360 Modern Warfare lobby with everyone screaming slurs at each other.
Oh, what do you want me to use? You tell me what you want
I mean, from personal experience, the podcast I do with Dolan, Nerd, and Colossal, like there's 4 of us, and we have the added difficulty of us not being in the same room, having lag because one of us is in Mexico, one of us is in America, one of us is in Australia, one of us is in the UK. And unfortunately, because Discord has a bit of input delay, we end up speaking over each other. Like it can be hell, but still, we make it work. I know podcasters use a lot of cheat codes, like Joe Rogan, for example. Whenever he has a host on, he purposely messes with the host's headphones so they can actually hear their own voice when they talk. And they do that on purpose because when someone else speaks, they can also hear that, to the point that your brain gets so like frazzled, you can't continue the conversation. So talking over someone is basically impossible. You know, George had it really hard, and you could say, hey, maybe he's overreacting, but I've seen various clips on the podcast where, you know, people are just facing away from George, almost like he's like a random viewer that broke in, and everyone's kind of like too awkward to ask him to leave, so he just sits there, even though he was an actual host. And Logan definitely promoted like the bullying of George because it was content. I mean, even people like, you know, Shaquille O'Neal jumping in on George, but when the poor guy is just trying to, you know, add something to the dialogue.
Hold on. You ain't gonna ask me a question?
He waits. He likes to wait until he's got the Bro, you tapped me in play mode and I broke my hand. What happens if I ask the wrong question and you punch me? Listen, man, I read the Bible a lot when they talk about David and Goliath. I've never seen a giant. And so, like, I'm literally just, I'm a little taken.
You've been sitting over here for 30 minutes and that's all you can freaking say? Fucking kidding me.
And George didn't like this because, you know, he was someone that wanted to grow and everyone was putting him down. I'm not saying he's a saint. I mean, believe me, if you're involved in Logan Paul's inner circle, you've probably got some skeletons in your closet. But all of this escalated in episode 351. This was the episode with Bobby Lee. Mike even said on the Tiger Belly podcast recently that that episode was actually so bad, it ruined a lot of people's lives. Now, the Bobby Lee episode, you probably haven't even heard of it because they've done their best to try to bury it because it is genuinely one of the worst podcast episodes of all time. Many podcast hosts' biggest fear is, you know, not having enough to talk about. But here, they talk about too much. They go into way too much detail. And obviously, like I said before with George, the dynamic in this episode was even worse because, you know, Bobby was basically just sat facing away from George the entirety of the time. This then leads to George thinking, uh-oh, I'm in an episode as a host and I am saying nothing here. Like, no one cares about what I'm saying. Boys, I got it. I'm going to do a monologue. And when I do the monologue, people are going to put it on TikTok with the GTA car gameplay going down the ramp at the bottom, and it's going to get lots of views. So it basically talks about trying to find himself, and this is also mixed in with a bunch of comedic bits in between. And then Bobby, who is a guest, by the way, not a host, immediately jumps on George's back, roasting him, basically saying that he's an absolute vibe killer.
Honestly, if I was not Christian, I'd probably be suicidal.
It was just a long monologue.
He was just waiting.
Let me just say something. I loved what you were saying. It was just very long. Yeah, we just need writers to edit that down.
Usually when I do my comedy, I don't have writers in the room.
Okay, I can tell.
Now, some people did have sympathy for George. A lot of people didn't. They basically said, I mean, bro, you're sat next to a comedian, a funny man, and you're asking the funny man to not be funny. That's kind of cringe. But other people tried to add, basically saying, George doesn't really get to speak a lot on the episode. He really is just being used as a punching bag. Because we know for a fact, if Logan ended up being the punching bag on his own podcast, he would not have that. He would walk out. He would quit his podcast. And then this all accumulates to the infamous part where George basically rage quits the lobby. He leaves, disconnects, and doesn't come back for the rest of the episode.
He is clocked out.
I know.
George has been under a tremendous amount of abuse.
George.
No, stop, George. I want you over here with me. George, I want you over here with me. Chase him down. Go. You find him. George, no, go get him. Go get him.
And then Bobby adds fuel to the fire, just calling him a bitch boy, saying like, that's so unprofessional. That's so cringe. Now, although I have talked about this many times, how, you know, this new wave of influencers online, they are masters at clickbaiting. They will purposely overreact because they know that someone's going to clip it and hopefully make them famous. That's the reason why you see so many streamers reacting to content and they just completely overreact and scream and shout to like the most mid clips imaginable because they think, okay, this is kind of mid, but also monetizable because then people clip it and I get famous and I get money and I like money. And although that being said, I'm doing like the Star Trek thing. What the hell? And although that being said, I do genuinely think that George, you know, rage quitting, F4ing to the desktop, that was real. That wasn't staged. He was genuinely tilted, and that was like months and months of just rage building up within him. Now, although we should wrap it up there and be like, oh, it's a little bit of light trolling, that's it. Bobby was doing some really weird things to George that a lot of people seem to, you know, just completely gloss over. He was asking George at one point to like smell his junk, his below, his down here regions. Smelling that, and he even keeps trying to grab Mike's penis like throughout the episode. He even tried to pull out his own schlong in the episode and get Mike to touch it.
No, smell. You gotta smell it. So you're gonna fucking smell my dick, and it's not gay. So here. Yeah. I have to grab your head.
No.
And apparently as well, during the podcast, there was worse stuff that Bobby did, but the producers cut it out. And in turn, it's made George look like he was just completely overreacting, even though there is a lot of context missing.
Who was the first person that jumped off the couch and said, George just left, that was not good, we have to fix the situation?
But did they not cut shit that you should have stood up for me and said, hey, you can't cut that shit? That's gonna make him look like an idiot for leaving.
Okay, let's slow down. Numerous times on the show, cut things that we believe will protect the integrity or reputation of the guest.
That protected nobody but him.
You know, there's no videos online of Bobby giving Logan, you know, the sucky special. I would love the scenario where I grab one hand like this, bring it towards me, stirring it like a pot, like a cauldron, a beautiful elixir, and then suddenly... That is what I would love to do today. You know, there's nothing like that. The only confirmation we really have is George himself saying there was more stuff there, but to protect Bobby, it was cut out. Now, after that episode, things got a lot more rocky between George and Logan. Even at one point having this dialogue talking about religion, Christianity, because George himself is very religious. And during this dialogue, which basically boiled down into, I will speak over you now very loudly, Logan did eventually retract his comments.
I made some pretty out of line comments. The following 3 weeks have been the hardest period of my fucking life.
And the funny thing is, guess what episode Logan retracted his comments on? The Crypto Zoo episode. The one thing that has still been following Logan Paul to this day that he refuses to address. Now, eventually, early last year, George, you know, just fully left the podcast. He left his podcast and he started a new one called The George Janko Show. Is that the most mid name for a podcast imaginable? Yeah, pretty much. But to be fair, Impulsive was, you know, Logan Paul in Impulsive, the Japanese forest. You get it. it. You get it. He's impulsive. Lamau. Same reason that we call the podcast To Be Honest. If you know, you know. Now, what a lot of people do when they get their own platform, they use said platform to cry. They don't directly cry. They throw a lot of shade, which is what George did for a lot of the episodes, basically saying, you know, did he leave? Was he fired? And that is until he had Logan Paul's conjoined twin on the show, Mike Milak. And here he claims that loads of stuff was edited out to make him look worse. You know, part of the podcast with Bobby Lee was.
Did they not cut shit that you should have stood up for me and said, hey, you can't cut that shit? That's gonna make him look like an idiot for leaving.
Even the episode where Mike appeared on Tiger Belly, which is Bobby Lee's podcast, part of that was cut out as well.
You saw me, I went on Bobby's show. Yeah. Right? And they cut around it. You said that I have no control over that.
And Logan even apparently reaching out and saying, hey, you know that energy drink that's really popular, Celsius? Don't take a sponsor with them because I own an energy drink company and it's called Prime.
Not only was I controlled and pushed around on Impaulsive, but then Logan's making calls and directing my show. That's not okay.
What was that about?
He told me that I couldn't take Celsius.
He also goes on to say he would never grow as a person in that environment. Apparently Impaulsive was just losing money overall and he just wasn't being paid.
And Logan came after me for my religion. The show hit rock bottom and we weren't getting paid.
But it's not all bad. He says he was very grateful for his time on Impaulsive and he doesn't even hate Bobby Lee. He just thinks that that episode just had a really shit outcome. Now, I'm sure you all know what happened next. Logan Paul booted up TikTok and Jesus Christ, I don't know who he's sucking off on TikTok. I don't even follow the guy. But every fifth scroll I see whenever I open TikTok, it'll always be Logan Paul. He'll be here in the corner of the screen and it'll be a green screen showing some like court document or something he's reacting to. I'm actually just sick of seeing it at this point. I'm hopefully making this video so it gets out of my For You page. Now, when you look into this response, you do kind of start to realize that Logan is beating around the bush with a lot of topics. In particular, how Bobby Lee was basically, you know, just straight up sexually harassing these guys on his podcast. So what he does in typical Logan Paul PR fashion is he changes the argument. It's not about that anymore because that's bad. Sex stuff? That could be lawsuit. I'm already dealing with CryptoZoo. Instead, let's talk about George being paid. Let's bring up an argument I know I can definitely win. So then everyone gets distracted by that and then thinks I'm the good guy, at least for, you know, the next month or so. So what he does is shows texts from George and it's really cherry picking to kind of build this narrative that, you know, he's basically in the right and George is just a flat out liar. And then in the last 20 seconds of the video, he barely apologizes to George.
I should not have mocked his beliefs. I apologize for that. I should have stuck up for him with Bobby Lee and I definitely should have had his back more like a friend.
If anything, Logan actually apologized more in that religious debate they had during the CryptoZoo episode, more than what he did in this TikTok. You know, maybe someday that they'll resolve their dispute, that they'll hug and they'll kiss, or they might just do what KSI and Logan did, hate each other until they realize they can make more money by being mates. But what I do want to make the focus on now is Bobby Lee and his quite bad behavior. The stuff I've seen this guy do is basically only found in the depths of VR chat and nowhere else. Now, obviously, a lot of what George said, it's just his word against Logan's and Bobby's and pretty much everyone else's. There's no proof. But there are multiple compilations on YouTube of Bobby, you know, hugging, kissing, and like touching various, you know, news anchors, hosts. I say this a lot as a bit, right? Because, you know, like in the TikTok comment section, someone's having an argument, they're losing it, and they basically just say, I'm going to touch you. And there is nothing you can do about it. You're getting touched tonight. You know, it's just a bit to say, like, I'm going to touch you. Like it's not that deep, but he was actually touching people. And the funny thing is about Bobby, when he realized that he went too far with this stuff, he'd be like, oh, I lived in Europe for a bit. That's how people were, Lamau. You know, when he realizes he's pushed the boat out too far, he then tries to basically say, oh, it was all a bit. It was all a bit, guys. But obviously, you can only say it's a bit so many times until people kind of realize, okay, bro, you're a little bit weird. There's even this one interview that is just really awkward. And you can tell that there's a news anchor that's like really uncomfortable with Bobby and actually tries to, you know, move away from him. Mostly because he wanted to kiss her ankle bones. What?
Yeah, you don't feel good? You want me to do it again? What am I? What? Where are you going?
And then he basically get up out of his seat and coax her to sit back down. And then basically just this weird ultimatum that, like, you know, if you don't come back, if you don't sit down in this chair right now, I am never coming onto this show again.
You're being so rude right now. Sit down. I apologize. My bad. I'm sorry. If you get up again, I swear to God, I'm never going to come back here.
I mean, I'll be honest, it's a pretty pathetic threat, a pretty pathetic ultimatum. If anything, it kind of reminds me of the people in the COD lobbies that say, you know,
if you steal my kill, I'm leaving the clan.
And even though she's really uncomfortable, she still, you know, through the power of persuasion, through Bobby Lee, she sits back down on the couch. And then at one point, she even like covers with her coat to stop Bobby from touching her. It's so awkward. There's even a story involving Theo Von. If you don't know Theo Von, he's one of those podcast hosts that even though he's like in his 50s, he is the master of clickbaiting. Basically, you start a podcast, just pretend that you're like, you know, just borderline 10 IQ, 1 intelligence stat in Fallout New Vegas. You know, the one where the guy tells you like when you pick it, he's like, oh my God, you're actually a fucking moron.
I fixed up your head as best I knew how. I guess I missed a spot.
He is the god of clickbaiting. Now, I had no idea who Theo Von was. I'll be honest, for the longest time, I actually thought he was Miley Cyrus's dad. So that just shows how out of touch I am. But he told a story to Theo Von called the Tijuana story. And then in this story, he talks about how he took advantage of a child prostitute to have sex with.
There was a girl that she seemed scared. Yeah. That's the one I wanted. Oh.
And then, in his own words, the child cries the entire time. So Bobby has to speed it up to get it over with.
And I look at her face and she's crying. So I do what any good guy would do. I start power fucking her. So because I want to get it over with.
And then when he got backlash for saying that, because... Wow, really? You'd get backlash for saying that? Really? What a world we live in! Now, apparently the lore behind this joke came all the way back in 2013. Where apparently he mixed two bad jokes together, and it ended up metamorphosizing into that joke. And you're probably wondering, what two jokes did he mix in the lab to create that abomination? Well, the first one was apparently having sex with a 12-year-old girl that looked like Natalie Portman. Specifically the movie Leon the Professional, which... unfortunately, is a very good film. I only watched it because I think it was in like the top 50 IMDb films of all time. And now I can't even watch that film anymore because of what Bobby Lee said. If anyone's wondering, my personal favorite part in the Leon film is where Gary Oldman takes drugs. It is a 10 out of 10 scene. And the other joke, which is a lot less incriminating, but still disgusting, was having sex with his girlfriend, and he wanted to speed it up because apparently she started crying about her dead nan. I'm sorry, Americans watching, we say nan over here, like we say mum with the letter U in it instead of the letter O. Idiots. Also, even more earth-shattering news dropped. Remember when I introduced Bobby by talking about the Down syndrome joke? Apparently that was just another joke he made up completely for attention. Shocking that comedians can actually lie about their material. Surely someone will stop them. Again, like, I'm not calling out Bobby for like making up jokes because again, I think the worst thing in comedy is people stealing other jokes. But I don't think anyone is stealing Bobby's material, especially with the... Jesus, I can't even repeat half of it. Now, everyone can change. Everyone can learn. Everyone can grow. I truly believe that. If Bobby stopped this whole bit, like after Impulsive, the grabbing and the smelling of the junk and stuff, I wouldn't care. I wouldn't be making this video. But Bobby, even though the producers covered for him and deleted a lot of the footage, he still didn't learn his lesson. Remember that Bad Friends podcast I talked about earlier that he's a host on? He actually had a guest on there, Bobby Althoff. Now, I've talked about her before. I've talked about how everyone seems to think that she's an industry plant because she blew up basically out of nowhere. She started off on TikTok making a bunch of, haha, I'm pregnant, and that is relatable. That is relatable on TikTok. I mean, it's not relatable in the gaming space. One of the biggest games that ever flopped that came out was Amnesia Rebirth because you played as a pregnant woman. On TikTok, where there's women and wine moms, I'm sure it's relatable. Anywhere else, not really. So a lot of people started to think, why are you now doing podcasts with Drake, Bobby? And when people started to question it, the podcast was quickly removed, leading people to even believe at some points that basically like they made the podcast so Drake could pipe her, and that was it. Like then the podcast was deleted. Drake's lawyers, if you want to contact me and send me a cease and desist, you want to take me to court, my entire claim is a thread I found on Twitter from a guy with 7 follows. But Bobby Althoff was a guest on the podcast with Bobby Lee, and it was just so awkward.
I would love to see your feet.
Thank you.
Jiminy Crickets.
Jiminy Crickets, I fucked up.
Why would you say that out loud?
I was looking at her boots right now. I go, like the boots, but I'm like, what's underneath it? And I go, probably nice feet.
How big are your feet?
Why?
What size shoe do you wear?
Yeah, that's not...
Why?
A 6?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I do have to preface and say Bobby Althoff's entire gimmick is basically her just being, you know, deadpan and unimpressed. There's another comedian in the UK that does the exact same thing, Amelia de Moldenberg. She does a show called Chicken Shop Day, and it's pretty much just sat there being, you know, very awkward. And Lamau, this is cringe. Why aren't you laughing?
Can you cook?
No. Is that a problem? I can do other things. I can make a dragon with my hands, like that. See, that's a dragon. So, I can do that.
But the point I'm making, Bobby Althoff, she's meant to be unimpressed. She's meant to set up, you know, a shield. Like, if you throw anything at her, she's just gonna be like, yeah, and... But even she was a little bit fazed by the stuff that Bobby Lee was saying to her. You know, Bobby starts saying that, you know, he would love to see her feet, you know, this kind of cringe humor to get under her skin. And then the other host, Andrew Santino, even starts joining in, asking about her shoe size. I mean, I get it. You know, each to their own. I'm never allowed to judge kinks again in my life. I totally understand that. But even then, to make Bobby Althoff feel uncomfortable people, wow, you did something really bad there. Now, if they did that bit once, like, okay, fair enough. I mean, whatever. Like, it's not really that bad. But they literally did that bit and they beat it into the ground. Like I'm not sure whether I'm talking about like Bobby being harassed here or just how unfunny this bit is. I'm not sure what's worse. And then Bobby Lee gets down on the ground and basically begs Bobby Althoff, please don't leave. Please don't leave. We need the content.
I'm texting Luke.
Oh, don't text Luke.
Who's Luke?
Her manager.
Why? Like I cut this out?
Yeah.
No, please. No. No. Listen, Bobby.
Begging.
Yeah.
Bobby,
Begging.
Please don't leave. Please don't tell your manager that, this was an uncomfortable situation. I really apologize. I love you so much. Thank you so much for being here, Bobby.
And one thing I really do need to point out, because Bobby Lee looks great for his age, the guy is not in his 30s. He's 52. He is 52 years old. And Bobby Althoff is 26. She's a year younger than me. So it's a little bit weird. But again, despite all of this, Bobby Lee is still one of the most successful podcasters. Now, I didn't make this video as like, oh, we need to cancel Bobby Lee. We need to deplatform him. We need to end his career. It's just pretty obvious that he has like a pattern of behavior of just being very, cringe. His entire humor is basically just based around being very sexual with people he has. And I think I'm allowed to say that it is pretty weird to watch, especially because the guy is like so old. He could basically be my dad. Oh God, did I just say that? Oh Jesus. Now to return back to, George and Logan, like Mike Milak said, the situation is very complicated. A lot of these issues really do come down to prioritizing and platforming the wrong people, and also money, because we all love money. Because, you need to ask the question, why would Impaulsive prioritize Bobby's image over George? Oh yeah, because Bobby is way more famous, has way more money, way more connections, and you'd rather be on Bobby's good side than... Who's this George guy? It says he's Christian, bro. Oh, it's cringe. He probably says stop when you swear in public. That sucks. And I do understand the method to the madness. I know that podcast episodes, you want that React Andy clip. You want that clip that everyone starts sharing, and all the people that, do these videos be like, how I make 20K a month as a TikTok clipper. It's part of the ecosystem. It's all about clipping and content farming, because content now is moving to more and more short form content. I've said this a million times. The biggest streamers that are blown up, I Show Speed, Jinxie, Queso, they didn't blow up from Twitch. Fuck no. They blew up from people clipping their stuff and putting it on TikTok. And then people go, ooh, who is this? I think overall the worst thing about this situation is the fact that Logan kind of, put the priority of Bobby over his friend, George. Because again, he saw Bobby as a bigger safety net, a bigger way to make contacts. But unfortunately, when you're that big and you're in that, that kind of like streamer culture LA scene, even though I know he doesn't live in LA because taxes were too high, he actually moved to a different country, which by doing so, by the way, I'm basically paying no tax. He's inflating the economy more than one of my commissions. I just think your friend should come first and stop asking for women's shoe sizes. It's kind of cringe.
Don't pee on the floor, use the common